Here we go, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Simon Götzen, and it's time for my first ever M14 draft on Magic Online. I've done a couple in real life, but you're actually watching the absolute premiere here. Guardian of the Ages is our rare. It looks nice, but I think it's just not good enough, really. You pay 7 and then you get a really conditional card, and your opponent can usually, well, get around its drawback quite effectively. There is Young Pyromancer, which is definitely powerful in this format, and then Predatory Sliver is a good green common. Train Condor, arguably one of the best blue commons. It is nice with cards like Scroll Thief or with Rumbling Baloth in green, but I don't like to pick it up that early. I personally think it's worse than it looks like. I'm going to go with Young Pyromancer here because it offers such a high utility for a simple 2-drop, and I even think that Predatory Sliver is the better first pick than Train Condor because its upside is so much higher. If you want to go slivers, which we see a Battle Sliver here, then you really want to make sure that your slivers have the highest power possible, because that's what really makes them useful, which means that Predatory Sliver, Battle Sliver, and some of the rare slivers are what you really want. Path of Bravery isn't all that interesting, although I could see playing it at some point. Battle Sliver is nice. Corrupt is one of the most powerful black spells in the format, and other than that, Giant Growth, Master of Diversion, Time Map, Nightwing Shade, a plethora of mediocre cards. I think Master of Diversion isn't all that exciting, and I don't like Time Map. I think the effect is not all that great in a format which is somewhat slower than general expert sets. The decision here is between Corrupt and Battle Sliver, and I'm going to go with Corrupt because I think it's slightly stronger than Battle Sliver, even though I might be making a mistake by passing both Predatory Sliver and Battle Sliver here, as it means that it's going to be really hard to go into slivers myself. This pack is missing 2 uncommons. Mindsparker is a reasonable rare, but nothing bombastic. It's really just a better version of Kenyan Minotaur most of the time, although First Strike is quite potent. Chandra's Outrage is the best red common and arguably the best common in M14. I think there's an argument to be made that pacifism could be better, but Chandra's Outrage is really good. Nephalia Sea Kite, one of the other cards in blue that are contenders for the best common card, but yeah, blue is really more of a deep color, but nothing stands out to me all that much. There's also Messenger Drake and Claustrophobia, but after having a Young Pyromancer already, I think that Chandra's Outrage is a great signal, and we're definitely going to pick it up here. Hunt the Weak, another card that somebody might want if they're drafting green, or slivers even. But Chandra's Outrage is nice, especially because we have Young Pyromancer already. The one thing that we have to keep in mind, though, is that Corrupt wants us to play a lot of swamps, and Chandra's Outrage needs at least 8 mountains, or that's where we would feel comfortable playing this card. Okay, this pack is quite interesting. Given that we have black and red cards already, it's quite possible that we want to go into some kind of sacrifice synergy deck with Active Treason and Blood Bear and some of the cards that actually become a lot better when you have sacrifice outlets and cards to sacrifice, which means that Barrage of Expendables might actually be the pick here. I think most of the cards in this pack are not all that exciting. We can usually get Lava Axis or Lightning Talons later, and Angelic Accord is a card that doesn't really fit into what we have so far, so I'm quite happy to pick up a card here which isn't amazing, but it could pay off quite nicely if we get the Young Pyromancer, maybe Molten Rebirth, maybe Act of Treason deck going. Okay, so far we've seen a second pick Corrupt, but basically no other black cards. No Deathgaze Cockatrices or anything of that sort. There's a Ring Flash and a Mind Rod, both of which are fine, and they work nicely with Young Pyromancer, but I'm kind of hesitant to move into black because we just don't know where things are going yet. I do love Shiv's Embrace. I think it's better than Shortcutter, and I think it doesn't hurt to pass on the green cards. I think in this order, Shiv's Embrace, Giant Spider, and Wall of Frost are the best cards in the pack, but I'm not too keen on picking a non-red card when there's a Shiv's Embrace, simply because I want to position myself as best as possible. With that said, I think we probably continue with either Kenya Minotaur or Wild Guess, but both Charging Griffin and Spore Mound are possible alternatives. Charging Griffin being the aggressive white flyer that attacks for 3, and Spore Mound working really nicely with Barrage of Expendables, Young Pyromancer, or a sacrifice deck should we build it. The problem is that the sacrifice synergies are mostly in black also, but I think now that I look at it, even though we might not play the Spore Mound, if we do, it's probably better suited to this deck than having a random 4-mana 3/3, which we can usually do without. This pack does have Ultra's Reap, which would be part of the sacrifice deck. Other than that, Blur Sliver is probably better. It's a somewhat underrated sliver because the effect it has on the battlefield is quite profound. Hive Stirrings, Sliver Construct. There are slivers going around, but none of them are truly amazing or even all that interesting. I'm going to go with Ultra's Reap. I don't like the mana commitments of cards like Dragon Hatchling and Capacious Knight, although they are both playable, and I have no interest in picking up Illusionary Armor here. So far, there hasn't been any active treasons, and we also haven't seen Blood Barons, so it's possible that the best version of the sacrifice deck is just not available at this table, but we'll see that soon. We do have a hole in the 3-drop slot, which we could fill with Regathan Firecat. That seems more reasonable than picking a card that might be an off-color shade, making it really awkward to pump. And Dawnstrike Paladin, probably the best card in this pack, is just not where we want to be going. Disperse, honorable mention, but not the pick here. This is interesting. Shrivel is really, really good against us, but we would never want to play it, and people aren't going to main deck it. Fortify is quite nice with the token generation, but so far our token generation is Young Pyromancer and maybe a Spore Mound, but if we want to play red-green, then Fortify isn't doing anything. And then there's some blue cards that really shine in certain decks. Seacoast Drake, well, it's quite nice. I'm going to go with Fortify, I think, because I believe it has the highest upside, and I don't think that we will have any interest in hate drafting a Shrivel, which shouldn't be too relevant. Here I'm going to go with Battle Sliver. I think it's insane that this is still in the pack. Makes me think that slivers might be a lot more open than I thought, and especially the red slivers maybe, which we can keep in mind for the next pack. This pack isn't interesting. Disperse is clearly the best card, so I'm going to take that. Lava X and Pay No Heat are both playable, but Lava X is a little closer to what we are trying to do here. Don't like either of these cards too much, so I think after these picks we can certainly hide some cards. It's unlikely that we're going to be playing white, but I'm going to leave the Fortify because I like it with the token theme. And this is Chandra. Hey, we are red already, so why not just take that? I'm going to highlight it and then go through. We have Bubbling Cauldron, which is really nice with the sacrifice synergies. Blur Sliver, Child of Night, Mark of the Vampire. We could actually table something out of this pack, even if Train Condor, Advocate of the Beast are gone. Maybe a Spore Mount, maybe a Bubbling Cauldron. But I'm definitely taking the Planeswalker here. I want to play with it, and I hope it's going to be amazing. Next up we have Dragonac and Tenacious Dead, which are both great in the Sacrifice archetype. Nephalia Seakite, but even more so Border Servant, are great blue cards. And then there is even Croc Cygnus, Deathgaze Cockatrice, and some mediocre red cards. So let's see what we have. We have an Ultra's Reap and a Corrupt, and then we have a Spore Mound, but that's a double green card without any support. So I think the most conservative pick would just be to take the Dragon Egg, but to be honest, I think that Dragon isn't really amazing. It's just okay, really. So I would like to position myself into black here if possible. And the question is, what do I want then? Corrupt isn't all that great, as I have said, if we don't pick up a lot of black cards. But maybe Tenacious Dead is what we actually want. It's going to be best if we actually get the sacrifice synergies. I'm just going to go for it. I think Black-Red Sacrifice is a great archetype. It didn't seem like it was super open in pack 1, but I'm hoping that we'll be pleasantly surprised. Mana Ref Sliver, Opportunity, both great cards in their respective colors, but this pack is very deep on the commons as well. Deadly Recluse, Academy Raider, Blood Baron, Shock, Liturgy of Blood, and Claustrophobia. So this pack has so many options that it's going to be difficult for us to decide what we actually want. With the Tenacious Dead, we have one of the best cards for the Sacrifice archetype, and it's going to be comboing with Barrage of Expendables and any other Sacrifice cards that we get. One of the very good ones is Blood Baron, but I have a feeling that we might just want to pick a removal spell here and then hope to wheel one of the lesser commons out of this pack. It does kind of suck to pass a Blood Baron, but we aren't all in on that yet, and we do need some removal anyway. I do think currently that Liturgy of Blood, despite its double black casting cost, is a better card than what's it called? Shock. But this is an evaluation which I might still change over time. Here there is a second Barrage of Expendables, but that doesn't seem too amazing. Barrage of Expendables doesn't get better if you have two of them. If you draw the second one, it basically does nothing. And so far we have Tenacious Dead and Young Pyromancer. So while being a good card, we certainly don't need to pick it that highly, given that we already have one. There's a Siphon Sliver with Lifelink, which does work nicely with the Battle Sliver we already have, but it might just be better to go for Marauding Maulhorn or Mind Rod as just a good card without any strings attached. Well, the Maulhorn does have to attack, but I think it is the pick here. Don't think we're going to be copying triggered abilities, but there's an Act of Treason, so I'm going to take that, even though there's Death Gaze Cockatrice as well. Hopefully we can get, let's say, 2 more sacrifice outlets, which is going to make the Act of Treason really good. Crouching Wastes isn't really a limited card, but so aren't most of these cards. I'm just going to take the Spore Mound on the off chance that we're going to end up with a Barrage of Expendables Spore Mound deck rather than the black cards, even though it's unlikely. Ring Flash is better than Cyclops Tyrant, and all the other cards don't interest me. A Quarter Shield is fine on Firecat and Maulhorn, but Ring Flash is just much better. This pack has Striking Sliver, which currently is far too irrelevant, but who knows how things are going to develop. Bubbling Cauldron Wield. There's also a third Spow Mount, but now I'm just going to take the Cauldron. It's a sacrifice outlet for Tenacious Dead and the Act of Treason that we already have, and I have a feeling it's going to be quite good. Second Firecat is great for our curve. And this is actually difficult. Deadly Recluse wheeling is pretty insane, and now we have the option between Altar's Reap and Academy Raider, with both providing card advantage of a sort, but Altar's Reap is also good with Act of Treason, and we are planning to make a lot of 1/1s, and so I actually actively want Altar's Reaps here. Now I'm going to pick the second Barrage of Expendables. I think that we have a sufficient amount of synergy cards that drawing 2 barrages is going to be counteracted by the fact that if we get, for example, the Young Pyromancer going or the Tenacious Dead, that barrage is just going to be one of the best cards in our deck. I do want to hide these because it's just very unlikely that we're going to play them. There is almost no mana base which would make these work, but we can let them. We can keep them for now. We opened Chandra's Phoenix, which is nice because we have Chandra Pyromancer, but that's about it. There is a Molten Birth, which is somewhat better with the 2 Barrage of Expendables that we already have. And let's see, if we deal damage with red instants or sorceries or a Planeswalker, yeah, I think that's just not good enough. I mean, it's going to be a card that we can sacrifice, but it's so much more difficult to get it back. That Molten Birth is just going to be much better. If we win the flip once or twice, it's absolutely amazing, and if we drop a Young Pyromancer first, it's also very good. I would gamble on this wheeling, but I don't have the experience with this set yet, and also not with drafting this set in the 8-4 queues to be certain enough that Molten Birth is a card that tables. Chandra's Phoenix won't, I'm pretty sure about that, but it's the best card for our deck, so I'm taking it here. This pack isn't all that exciting. There's Rise of the Dark Realms, but it costs 9, and 9 is just generally too much for limited, or to plan for that in limited. There's a Fire Shrieker, which works quite nicely on our fire cats. So far we don't have a Blood Baron yet, but I don't want a third Altar's Reap, and I don't want to splash any removal cards. And Dragon Hatchling is just really underwhelming. So I'm going to pick this Fire Shrieker. It's not guaranteed that it's going to end up in our deck, but it's probably the card with the highest upside. Here, Pitchburn Devils is a nice card to continue with our synergy theme. And Fleshwhelver Giant looks nice, but I don't really like it because it costs 7. You can do much better. Academy Raider, Fire Shrieker, and Lightning Talons are the options, and Lightning Talons is not the card that we want in our deck. We want as many instants and sorceries as possible. We already have 2 Barrage of Expendables and a Shiv's Embrace, so yeah, an Aura is just not what this card wants, or what this deck wants. We could actually think about Vile Rebirth in a sense, because it is a spell that triggers Young Pyromancer, gives you a 2/2, and it's instant speed, so you might get tricky with it, or a Barrage of Expendables. I'm still going for Academy Raiders. We can hopefully wield the Vile Rebirth now that I've realized that we might actually want it in our deck. Okay, these packs are somewhat confusing. It's possible that we misread the table, but a 5th pick Sarah Angel, even in pack 3, shouldn't really happen, and Ajani's Chosen isn't that far behind. If you have for example, the Black-White Aura deck, then this is a pretty busted card. For us, there isn't anything here. Cyclops Tyrant isn't a card that we want in our decks, so I'm going to hate draft the 4/4 flyer. We see a late Act of Treason, which is a great gift. It's the 6th pick, so we would only have had 2 more packs of potential Act of Treasons, and that definitely makes our deck better. Here we have a Bogbrew Witch. We can actually tutor up the Bubbling Cauldron, which isn't amazing, but I think I'm just going to take it. I didn't see a Festering Newt, but this card looks playable just if we can get the Cauldron. Shimmering Grotto is only okay, and in 2 color it really doesn't add that much. Okay, we did get Annoying Zombie as another sacrifice card that's a little better than the Barrage. It's also a 2-drop. We don't have many creatures yet, and I'm not going to play Pyromancer's Gauntlet, even though it's insane with Chandra. So Annoying Zombie it is. Angelic Accord, by the way, also quite a nice card to build around, and once you get Bubbling Cauldron, it's legitimate threat to your opponent. Here the decision is between Dragon Hatchling and Undead Minotaur. I think having a 2/3 rather than something that we need to pump mana into should work out better for what we're trying to do. A 3rd Altar's Reap I can't really see myself playing, so I'm going to take the creature. I think there is a danger that we could be lacking in creatures, and that Vile Rebirth might actually make the deck, as I said. So green didn't work out, which was to be expected. And we can hide the white, hide the blue, hide the lands, and then we should have more than enough cards to build a nice deck, and we can still cut quite a few of them, then hopefully making the most synergistic deck possible. Yeah, I like that. Here we go with deck building, and I think it's probably best to just see what we're working with. Stuff of the Death Magus isn't going to make it, that's for sure, so we can actually focus on what we are working with here. Striking Sliver isn't a card I want to play, so that's an easy and a very easy cut. And we already see that the main weakness of our deck is the lack of creatures, but our sacrifice outlets also fuel Act of Treason, and we do have a Molten Birth, which does count additionally. I don't think that's a Lava Axe deck, but Corrupt is probably making it. Demolish is not a limited card, so yeah, I think this is what we're looking at with 29 cards, and the creature count is 12, but there's a Vile Rebirth here and a Molten Birth, both of which would work nicely in this deck because of Young Pyromancer, and well, Molten Birth is just really great with Barrage of Expendables also. Meaning that the creature count is 14, which is low, but not too low, and we are just going to have to be careful how we trade our creatures and how we are actually going to win the game. Some games we are going to take over with Tenacious Dead, and the late game power provided by Barrage and Bubbling Cauldron. Other games we're going to have to work much harder for that. I like Shiv's Embrace in that regard because it is another nice way to just win the game, not out of nowhere, but somewhat unexpectedly. If I had to take out cards, I think Wild Gas is pretty bad. Altar's Reap I want because of the combo with Act of Treason, but I can't play too many creature-dependent spells, and I want to mainly be sacrificing my creatures. Shiv's Embrace is powerful enough on any of my creatures that I actively like it, but Fire Shrieker has to go then, I feel like. And that still leaves us with 27 cards. Every creature that we cut is going to make it more difficult for us to win and to stop an early aggression. I think Dragon Hatchling is a card that we might not want, and we could also argue that Battle Sliver is really just a 5 mana 5/3, which isn't bad, but we do have the Fire Cats at 4/1 to trade off with Green's Baloths and things like that. So it's actually possible to play this without the Battle Sliver, I feel like. Marauding Maulhorn I like a little better than Battle Sliver, but that might also be a mistake. Or, well, that might be a wrong assessment. I've been impressed by the Maulhorn basically every time I've played it, so I wouldn't want to cut it. Maybe Ring Flash is a card that we could leave on the sidelines. We do have Chandra Pyromancer to deal 1 damage, and we do have 2 Barrage of Expendables, so there is actually not that much of a reason to be afraid of 1 toughness creatures, and it's unlikely that we're going to need it as a combat trick, because most of our creatures are pretty bad. You can't really Ring Flash a creature and then trade with Regath and Firecat all that effectively, and you're also running into potential tricks your opponent might have. So that's 25. I would actually want to have 18 lands in this deck, but I don't think it might just not be possible. Like, these Altar's Reaps, they aren't even that great. Maybe it's correct to just say, like, play 1 Altar's Reap, because our main sacrifice engine is Barrages, Bubbling Cauldron, and a way to search for it with Bark Brewage. We even have Annoying Zombie, so Altar's Reap might just be too weak for this deck. Let's see what happens if we just decide to cut it all. We do reduce the number of black spells somewhat, which isn't irrelevant. It does mean that we need to work a little harder for Act of Treason, but I like the fact that we have more creatures that way. And Altar's Reap and Young Pyromancer isn't the greatest combo in the world, so I think this might actually be a reasonable way to go. And I think because it's core set, we have to keep Shiv's Embrace. If we are playing in a matchup where we are facing, for example, pacifisms and claustrophobias, then it's easy to take out Shift's Embrace and play Alter Sweep instead. But for the main deck, I actually like it. The last decision is if this can work as a 17 land deck, and I think it should. We have an Academy Raider, and we do have quite a lot of stuff to do for 3 mana. It's not like we should be flooding or being screwed too badly with this curve. We do need 3 mana at some point, but it's not really not that bad. Now, Corrupt is significantly worse if we don't have the right amount of black swamps. Gnawing Zombie is a black activated ability, Tenacious Dead basically also, and then Liturgy of Blood is double black. Now, one could argue that Corrupt is just not good enough in this deck, and just play a really light black. If we play 17 lands, and might be going for a 10-7 mana base, then on average we are probably only going to be casting Corrupt for 2 or 3, which is actually pretty bad. The one argument for playing more black is the Tenacious Dead, because then we want to like go off with Barrage and black mana and have just as much black as red almost, but we do need to pay colorless here, so anything between 50-50 and a 1-2 distribution is still fine. So if we want to make this deck more consistent, we actually take out the Corrupt and maybe play an Alter Sweep in order to have a 10-7 mana base and feel good about it. I think I like that. It is giving up some power for consistency, and we are still playing 10 swamps, but hopefully the longer the game goes, the better our synergies become, and the less important it is to actually have a powerful spell like Corrupt. And that way we still have Battle Sliver just as a 5 mana 5/3, which is basically a Marauding Mulehorn that comes down a turn later but doesn't have the drawback. Okay, I think that's a reasonable build. I'm not 100% on, let's say, cards 21 to 23 and how the exact mana distribution should look like, but we still have the sideboarding to fix any mistakes we've made. Let's see how it goes.